Hi there, Sonia here. Welcome back to another episode of the Help I Am Artist podcast. I love seeing artists succeed, and this podcast is there to help artists like you get clear and confident about your art. As artists, so much of what we do comes from within us. How we feel and what we think will literally determine our steps. And that is why I focus so much on the mindset behind good art. As artists, we need to realize we are in business. In order to grow in our art and actually earn a living from our creativity, we need to not only develop our skills, but we need to adopt a healthy business mindset. Let's face it, we all want to make an impact with our art, bring that which is on the inside out in a more powerful and impactful way, and to connect our art with an art audience. But how do we do this? How do we connect with our art buyers? And what tools can we use to communicate this? The Help I Am Artist podcast is here to help you on your journey, whether you're just starting out or whether you've been a working artist for a while. Each week I share steps, tips, and insights on how to take your art to the next level. In order to make each episode as practical as possible, I have made worksheets for you to download. The questions and the exercises will help you decipher what you need in order to take the next step. But back to this week's podcast. A few years ago, I had the delightful experience of visiting Giverny, a quaint village 80 kilometers outside of Paris. Maybe you think, that word, Giverny, the one I found a little bit difficult to pronounce, that sounds familiar. Then it's probably because you've read up on Claude Monet. Just some quick background information for us art lovers. Towards the end of the 1800s, the convergence of three revolutionary innovations completely altered the way artists work, and it had a profound effect on their art. Number one, the expansion of the railway network. Now you may think, what has that got to do with art? But it had a profound influence. There was the development of paint in tubes. That was quite revolutionary. And the invention of photography. Those three things meant one thing: mobility. These innovations were catalysts to get the artists out of their stuffy studios and heading towards the countryside. And the story goes that Claude Monet was taking a train trip outside of Paris to enjoy the countryside. And as he was sitting in the train, he looked out the window and he saw the village of Giverny, and he decided he was going to move there. In the 1890s, Claude Monet bought a house and set up a garden where he made many of his famous paintings. The breathtaking gardens and house are open up for artists to come and paint and draw. I spent an unforgettable day sketching and sitting in the sunny corners and staring at the vistas that I had only seen and admired in the Monet paintings. I later read up more about Monet and his life. I discovered, despite his beautiful house and gardens, didn't have an easy life as an artist. There were eyewitness accounts of Monet jumping on the train back to Paris with paintings under his arms and going door to door trying to sell them. Imagine this artist ringing your doorbell and asking to help. Well, I wish I had bought one of his paintings back there in 1890. That would have been a good investment. Money, or the lack of it, has been a pain point for many artists. And when I ask artists what the number one reason is for not creating their art, it's invariably money. Money was a topic that was a no-go area when I was at the Art Academy. It just didn't fit into the equation of passion and creativity and art. It was best left unaddressed. But the saying, money makes the world go round, is quite true. We can't do without it, and it would be wise to develop a healthy relationship with money. In this episode, I want to look at how to successfully price your art. How can you put a price, a value to that what you are making. I will talk through tips and practical guidelines and a pricing formula so that you can gauge how your art fits in the market you are serving and, if necessary, make the needed adjustments. Pricing your art can be rather overwhelming and very intimidating, as it is difficult to put a price to something that you make with such passion and with conviction and with enthusiasm. I even know artists that sometimes feel guilty about asking money for something that comes so easy and that they love to do. Other artists feel that the price that they put on their art is a direct reflection of them as a person. The price is a value judgment of who they are. Dealing with the mindset behind pricing is the first step in developing a healthy pricing strategy. Finding a price that is right for your art and dealing with those limiting beliefs or those myths or those lies that you might be hearing in your own head or artist's heart. The pricing overwhelm can really hit us when we can't really gauge whether we're asking too much for our art or are we undervaluing our art by asking too little. Of course we are excited to have our latest works on show or presented on a website, and we want everyone to just fall in love with what we're doing and buy our paintings. If you've been a working artist for a while, then you've probably experienced the selling your art in public. If not, then just wait. Your chance will come. Imagine you're at a show opening. A certain individual who has come to enjoy the collection at the gallery just keeps staring at a particular piece. Hypnotized and spellbound. They can't get enough of it. They keep walking up and down, going back to the painting to stare at it. Eventually they walk up to you as the artist and introduce themselves while extending a sweaty handshake. They announce that they would love to buy your painting. It would be perfect above their new couch in their newly renovated apartment, and it's exactly what they're looking for. It is love at first sight. But then you as the artist hold your breath and you wait for the but. But the renovation costs were way more than expected, and they really don't have the budget to pay the asking price for your art. Would you be willing to drop the price of your art, but with the certainty that your painting would be loved and enjoyed and be much appreciated? What would you do? Do you succumb to their sad puppy eyes, or do you stand your ground with confidence about your price and about the ability to sell your work? Do you have the courage to say no? Now, I'm not saying there's no room for negotiation, because negotiation has its place. But to really slash your price that you don't even cover your own costs, then you need to stand your ground. I must admit, standing strong is no easy feat. You know in the back of your mind that your rent is due and that you need to top up your art supplies. But being really clear and confident about your pricing will be a lifeline for you in these vulnerable moments. It's imperative to find your sweet spot when it comes to pricing, because too high and you won't sell, and too low in your price, you communicate that you don't really value your work, and then others won't either. The one thing that drives the price and the value of art is demand. Recently in the Netherlands there was quite a stir, and just to illustrate this point, I'll share a short story. A drawing of Peter Paul Rubens of a young man owned by our late Princess Christina, she's the sister of the former Queen of the Netherlands, sold at an auction in New York for an $8.2 million, which includes the $1.2 million auction costs. Prior to the auction, Sotheby's estimated the net worth of the sketch at $3 million, and yet it sold for $8.2 million. The sale was widely criticized in the Netherlands because the drawing had not been offered to the Dutch state or to local museums. The buyer, it is said, be a very wealthy American collector, namely Leon Black, the owner of the Chiquita bananas. Whether you agree or disagree of a sketch being sold for $8 million, it's interesting to note what drives up the price. Why was it so expensive? It all boils down to demand. Supply and demand. That's how the economy works. There are very few Peter, Paul Rubens still around, so the supply is very scarce, which drives up the demand. If paintings are scarce and sought after, the price will go up. Hence, artists becoming quite famous and rich, unfortunately, after they have passed. If paintings are scarce and sought after, the price goes up. That's why art collecting, if you do it right, can be such a lucrative investment. If a room is empty, it's very difficult to sell to. If there is an increasing demand of your work, and you sell out every time, then you probably need to have a look at your price and steadily increase it. If there's no demand for your work yet, then it's wise to start with a price which is more modest and see how the demand develops over time. But be clear about your intentions. This is a good place to start. Why are you selling your art? Are you making your art as a hobby and you don't really need to earn a living from your art? Or are you striving to make a business out of your art and to earn a regular income from selling? These are two totally different strategies. If you just love to create and do it to relax or to bless others, then it's fine to play with your pricing, or even ask people for a donation, or just to cover your expenses so that you can reinvest in art supplies. But if you're an artist that wants to grow in your art business, making a living from your art, and you want to be more intentional about your pricing strategy, then I have 13 factors that you can look at that will influence the price of your art. These guidelines are here to help you to try and gauge the price, the right price of your art. Now take note, this will take practice to find what your sweet spot is. The first factor is time. Many artists choose to count the number of hours that they work on a piece. They decide an hourly rate, add on the materials and the framing, and voila, they have their price. This is an interesting method, but it has its drawbacks. A creative process is never the same. Sometimes you simply take longer than other days. The amount of sleep, or the weather, or even your hormones will affect the time and the energy that you spend on a particular piece. If this is your only guideline, then there will be a great fluctuation in your pricing. In order to sell consistently, radiating trust and stability, then your prices need to reflect this too. I would keep a record of your hours, even if it's just to see how long you're working and if you're growing in your productivity, but just keep that number in the back of your head. Number 2, your price will be determined by where you're selling your art. It's just like real estate. In some locations, prices are higher, and in other locations, houses are priced lower. All has to do with the market. Are you selling your art at a booth at a farmer's market? Or are you selling together with a show with friends? Or are you selling in a rural setting where art is not yet widely appreciated? Or are you selling through a prestigious gallery in New York? The geographical location of where you're selling will influence the price of your art. Number 3, are you painting in oils or acrylics? Do you use cold wax or mixed medium? Do you add gold leaf or use scraps? Your technique and your materials will determine your pricing. Are you going to frame your work or leave it unframed? Framing can easily add €200 and more to your art piece. Materials and techniques will of course influence your price, and it's good to keep a note of how you use materials and what the expenses are. Number 4, what are your expenses? What expenses do you have to run your art business? Do you rent a studio? Or do you work in the basement of your home? What overhead costs do you have? And what about tax? Do you do everything alone? Or do you have a VA helping you out? Make a budget of all your expenses. And a good tip is to take your overhead and divide it into an hourly rate. This is the amount that you at least need to earn. If it takes you 5 days to make a painting, then you need to add this to your pricing equation. Take into consideration what you need in order to keep your art business going. Number 5, it's the level of your work. A big influencer of the pricing is the level of your work. Are you just starting out, or have you been painting for a few years? Are you at intermediate level, or are you more advanced? Have you been working for many years? Are you selling locally, internationally, worldwide? What's the demand for your work? Later in the episode, then I'll walk through the pricing formula with you. I will be more specific about the different criteria, and I will give you a clear and healthy framework in order to gauge your level. Number 6, if you're selling your work through a gallery, then you need to take into consideration that it's normal for a gallery to take a 40 to 50% cut off the price. Gallery owners are looking for collectors. They want collectors coming into the gallery time and time again, and will consider offering at least 10% discount as leverage and incentive to draw these potential buyers and turn them into collectors. This 10% discount is also worked into the price, hoping they'll be coming back for more. And these are important points to remember when working with a gallery. If you're working through a gallery, make sure that you go prepared and have that money conversation. Don't let the flattery of being asked or selected numb you from having the serious conversation. Decide what you want to earn on a painting and make clear arrangements what they will do for you. How big is their network? How active is the gallery and the gallery owner on social media? What other artists do they represent? And what PR and marketing are they going to do for you? Do you feel a connection? Do you feel valued and appreciated? If not, I would be very cautious about working under their representation. In podcast number 14, South African award-winning artist Leonie Brown talks about how she works with galleries and things to look out for. You can find that episode on my website. On to number 7, direct selling. If you have chosen to represent yourself and sell directly to your public, then of course you have far more control over the prices that you want to ask. It is only you that needs to be satisfied when asking the price. The important thing is to consider the demand and the market you are operating in. The pricing formula that I'll share at the end of the podcast will help you with the pricing. Number 8, selling your art online. Now the internet has changed the whole game when it comes to selling art. You can now finish a painting, take a photograph, and put it for sale online in a matter of minutes. The platform that you're selling your art on will determine your price. If you're selling your art through Etsy or Saatchi & Saatchi or through Facebook, will all have a different audience and appeal. This will determine the price range. So do some research. Have a look at what other artists are doing in your genre and with your years of experience. What are they doing? What are they asking for their art? And are they selling? There are thousands and thousands of artists selling their work online. And you'll just have to face it, you'll be a small fish in a very, very big pond. If you have chosen to sell your art online, you need to be very strategic and intentional to get traction and attention. This takes lots of hard work, as you really need to up your marketing game. What can you do to draw attention to your art? And how can you stand out? I have to think of a fashion designer I know. He was having a hard time trying to sell his new collection. So he decided he was going to think out the box. He asked some of his friends for help, and he had a pop-up fashion show in a bike tunnel in Rotterdam, the Netherlands. The bikers would get off their bikes and start taking photos and sharing it online, giving the needed attention to his collection. His clothing got the attention of the locals. Maybe you need to go out and do some painting outside, plein air, to draw some attention that you are an artist in a certain village or city. Or maybe you need to be the first artist painting a painting jumping out of an aeroplane, with a parachute of course. That would cause quite a stir. Make sure you got your camera on. Social media is a wonderful way to get attention and to cause a buzz. Check out episode 18. It's all about using Instagram stories to sell and to promote your art. It often surprises me that some bad art sometimes gets such good attention, and why some good art sometimes gets no attention. This often comes down to marketing. Loud marketing campaigns can really sway public opinions. But don't be afraid to make some noise. Just don't hurt yourself or get arrested. Number 9. Working in series. Are you working in a series of paintings, and maybe you've sold the main pieces of that collection? Maybe there are some pieces of that series that have not sold that well. You can negotiate with the prospective buyer for a special price. Or maybe you have some older works or studies or sketches that you can of course price differently than your finished work. Just be clear in how you communicate this. Be clear about what it is and why you're asking a certain price. Doesn't mean you have to have a whole explanation next to your painting, but you need to substantiate why you're asking it and to be able to stand behind it, commit to the price. It's important to be consistent in your pricing. You can't ask different prices for the same piece. If you're trying to sell the piece online or at a pop-up shop or through a private sale, then the price for the same piece needs to be the same in all instances. Remember, you're building trust. People want to make sure they're getting a good investment and not feel that it's being sold at a lower price on another location. Number 10. Holding on there. We're nearly there. Maybe a piece is damaged from taking it from show to show. Lugging it in your car, taking it out of the car. Pieces can get damaged. You can offer this piece at a discount or even allocate a certain piece of your older works for rent. I recently saw this when I visited the gallery of Chinese artist Xuan Wei in Amersfoort. Her older works were stacked against the side of her gallery, and potential buyers or renters could take a piece and rent it per month, and each piece had an allocated price of the rental per month. The size, that's number 11. There's a general understanding that larger works sell for higher prices. Many artists fall into this trap and decide to paint big, huge pieces, thinking that they can ask bigger and larger prices. But there is a downside, as many buyers simply don't have the real estate space or the wall space to put up a painting that's as large as a car. Remember, you need to know your market. If people are buying your art after having a vacation, then size really matters. They need to add on the shipping and the insurance costs, or otherwise it needs to fit into their suitcase or in their vehicle. There have been many surveys as to what art sells better. This has always intrigued me. And what comes out of the survey is that bright colors are selling, and especially if the color red has been added, seems to sell faster and at larger quantities than duller, darker tones. Interesting. I don't know if that's true. I would say experiment. Artists have also been advised to remove the sold pieces from their website gallery and put them on their portfolio page. Buyers that were surveyed felt like they were choosing from the leftovers and didn't have the best of the pick. This is something to consider. Nearly down to the end of the list. Reproductions. Are you going to make reproductions? How unique does your art remain? If you start selling it everywhere, the value for a collector or someone who wants to buy your art decreases. I know artists that have chosen to never sell their originals and just to monetize on reproductions in all shapes and sizes. They have chosen to sell reproductions or license their art as a source of income. The final point, number 13, commissions. Have you worked in commissions? Maybe a client has seen one of your paintings and loves it, but wants just something tweaked or something different. They want a custom-made art piece. Before you commit to a price, just give yourself a little bit of time to think about it. Thank them for their interest and tell them that you'll get back to them shortly. A commission is generally priced higher than a ready-made piece. You need to take some things into consideration. Do you need to schedule a photo shoot? Do you need to make several sketches or give them options? Are there loved ones or pets involved? And if it's a portrait, how many people are in the portrait? Does it require a sitting or working from really poor photos? Do you require multiple sittings? This, of course, will all influence the price of the piece, so you really need to think about it before you commit to a price. Once you've fixed the price, there's a little wiggle room left. These 13 factors will influence your pricing. In the podcast notes, I'll go through all 13 and you can find out and discover what's relevant for your art and for your pricing strategy. Besides these influencing factors, it's really good to work with a formula. Now, there are many pricing formulas out there, and you need to discover and experiment what works for you. Now, this is a formula that many European artists use, and it works in the centimeter measuring unit and not in inches. But of course, we all have calculators. You can convert the inches into centimeters, and of course, then the pricing formula will work. You have to bear in mind 1 centimeter is 0.39 inches, but Google can help you there. You can look on the podcast notes. I've written out the formula for you to look at. But just briefly, it all has to do with the size of the painting. You take the height and the breadth of your canvas, you add them together, and you get a total amount. This you will multiply by your experience factor. So you'll see the level of your experience will influence your pricing. In the podcast notes, you'll find 11 categories that you can look at to determine your experience factor. So the height of the painting plus the breadth of the painting multiplied by your experience factor, whether it is 2 or whether it's 25, and that all has to do with what your category is, that will give you the price of your piece. And it's good exercise to see, maybe you've got a price in your mind, what you think it's worth, and then put this formula to work and see what the price is, and then have a look and see if that matches the price. There's also a bonus factor that you can take into consideration, depending on maybe using gold leaf or a very expensive frame. You can of course add a bonus factor. You have to do some experimenting to find out what works for you. Does this price add up to what you're thinking? Or are you way off? How does it feel? What does your gut tell you? This is something that's quite instinctive, and see that you can develop your pricing strategy. It's important to find out what works for your art and be consistent and don't fluctuate too much. Don't raise your prices too often. Once you've hit your sweet spot, maybe once a year and never more than 10%. Unless you're selling out completely and very quickly, this of course means that your prices are too low and that you need to make some adjustments. You know if your formula works if you are steadily selling your art. You have found your sweet spot. There are some exercises that I want to share with you that you can do. You'll find more in my worksheet. The worksheet will help you with exercises to determine and gauge your price. But for example, take 5 to 8 artists that are working in a similar style, in a similar geographical area, and have the same years of experience, and do a Google search on them. Find out if they are selling and what the prices are of their art. Find out if you can see their price lists that you can find online or at the gallery that you're visiting. Put their work through a formula and see if it adds up. How does your work compare to their work? Some do's and don'ts. Be clear about your prices. Put them where people can see them, on a price list or online. Be transparent. If a buyer approaches you directly because they don't want to pay the gallery fees, then it's your responsibility to communicate this with the gallery. Integrity and honesty goes a long way and will pay off in the long run. Be consistent. Don't fluctuate too much and raise your prices more than once a year, as I already mentioned. And be prepared for the haggling, especially online. People will try and haggle you until you nearly give it away for free. But decide beforehand that you're not willing to do this or what your limits are. Or if you're in a group show, do some research about the average price in the range of that event. You want to complement the others that are showing their artwork. If your prices are too high or too low compared to the other people in the show, it'll be difficult to sell your work. If you are uncomfortable talking about pricing and money, then it's good to practice. Make it a point to get confident about naming your price, especially now that you know what you should be asking for your work. Make a script as how you will respond when people ask you, "How much does your work cost?" Then you will say, and you practice. Stand in front of the mirror and find the words. Do this many times until you can say it without stuttering or looking at the floor. You can even use your smartphone and take a video of yourself. Observe your own body language. Observe your eye movements. The next step is to practice it with somebody. Ask a friend or a family member to help you. Now I know this may seem weird, but it's a great way to get comfortable about asking and talking about your art price. Something that you can practice and learn. Now if you want to go deeper, then I've prepared a worksheet for you to download. I've added the guidelines for you to review and the formula for you to practice. The questions and answers will help you get a better grip of what you should be asking for your art and help you gauge your pricing. To access the worksheet, go to www.soniasmallhere.com/price. If you are listening to this podcast at the gym or on the road and you haven't been able to take notes, then I've added the highlights to the notes of the podcast. You can find this on my website. Well, that's all for this week's episode. Next week, I'll be back with another exciting podcast to help you grow in your art and your art business. Are you an artist and you're thinking about sharing your skills with others? Or are you already teaching, but you're having trouble filling your workshops or your art events? Then you're going to love next week's episode. The time has never been more exciting for artists. The internet has changed everything. It's like a perfect storm is developing. People are more informed and information is more accessible. Because we spend so much time sitting behind our computer screens, there's an increased longing to create, to make something with our hands, to be creative. And this is an amazing opportunity for artists that love to share their skills. As an artist, you can finish your painting and only sell it once. You'll have a one-off income. But when you teach and do it correctly, the possibilities to have a continual flow in your revenue are endless. But how do you start or set up an art teaching business? Where can you teach and how can you monetize your teaching efforts? Next week I'll share great ways in which you can supplement your art income by teaching. Now don't forget to have a look at my website, as there are a variety of free resources with all kinds of subjects available for you. If you want to receive these directly into your mailbox, then please leave me your name and your email. so that you can receive my regular content with tips and tricks and inspiring artist stories. And don't forget to share this podcast or leave a review on iTunes or wherever you listen to this podcast. This makes the podcast more visible and helps artists like you find it. Thanks so much for listening, and I'll see you again next time. Bye for now.